Hi all, I have another fascinating game of Leela to show you. This is against Tucano in their match, which was the 9th match of the TSAT Cup 2, second edition. This is round 4. Leela had already won the first 3 games, so it was starting to look like a one-sided match. Let's have a look at this game 4, E4 from Leela. We see the Caro Kann, knights F3, D5. This is the end of the opening book. Leela chooses knight c3. We have knight f6. Quite often in this position, bishop g4 is played, and the book line goes like this. A lot of games have had this continuation, where g4 is thought to be a slight advantage for white. So interesting bit of theory there. So knight f6 though is a little bit provocative. We have e5, knight fd7. And I'm pretty sure I've had some blitz games where I've played e6 as a pawn sack, disruptive pawn sack. Leela chooses d4. Now, a few things to point out actually. Knight e4 is the more theoretical book move. It seems white plays knight e2, and this kind of thing has been seen before. White gets a slight edge by sacking a pawn temporarily, but there's knight takes d4 here. If queen takes d4, that's a trap. Bishop b5 check and pick up the queen. Thanks very much, massive advantage. If knight c6 instead in this position, more sensible, then knight f3, and white has a small edge here. So knight e4 is thought to be one of the better moves. So knight fd7, a bit provocative. Let's have a look at e6 just for the record. On f takes d4, g6, this looks as though it could be very dangerous after h4 with this h5. Black, it seems, in theory, can play e5 at least. So with the strong idea of e4, for example, and if white reacts d takes, bishop g7, hitting that central pawn. If white has to take time to protect that, black can clamp down on h5. And it seems here that, for example, this continuation, it's at least even. Black's pieces are quite good. The f5 square is quite good for black. It's quite pleasant, actually, for black. Black's equalized. So Leela's choice, although more conservative, is less speculative, pardon me, than e6. Let's try and not do that. e6 is not used, so d4. We have e6 from black, knight g5. Yeah, a very, very aggressive knight move. Now, Tucano is faced with difficult options in this position. If bishop e7, it seems as though a dangerous looking move is queen h5. So black doesn't really want to give up the dark squared bishop. And if black has to play g6, this kind of thing seems to favour white. White's got a small edge at least. Here on g6, it seems h4 might actually be justified. For example, like this, with knight takes f7. This position, this speculative piece sack is very interesting. White gets a lot of compensation. The black king in the centre still. So black chose h6 here. And guess what Leela plays in this position? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play here? Okay, I thought it was super cool. Knight takes e6, and it's a bit reminiscent to me of one of the Kasparov Deeper Blue games where Kasparov got wiped out in the Caro Kann with a knight sack. But I think that was part of the computer's book moves. Here, Leela's just played this sacrifice with calculation one would expect. It's not part of the book. So what can black do apart from accept this? So it is taken, queen h5 check. So we're talking a piece here for just one pawn at the moment. Alternatives, are they useful for black? For example, g6, does it mean bishop g7 later? Not really. It's pretty bad for black, this position. For example, here, bishop g5 check, queen takes g5, and now if king f7, bishop g6 wins the queen, and if knight f6, that's horrendous after just taking the rook. So yeah, queen after queen h5 check, g6 doesn't do black too many favours, it seems. So we have king e7, and now you might think, well, was the idea bishop g5 check to pick up the rook. Actually, it wasn't. It seems as though, yeah, bishop d3 is a much more controlled move than bishop g5. On bishop g5 check, for the record, let's see what happens. H takes. White can pick up the rook. Queen e8. Bishop d3. King d8. White might be able to claim a small edge, but not much more. So bishop d3 is much more controlled. Now, there are still options of bishop g5, and if queen e8 here, then the queen can be kicked away with bishop g6, for example. And here, queen h4 check is powerful. With no king e8 available, this would be winning a piece for white with a big advantage, winning a piece back. So in the game, actually, after bishop d3, bishop d3 here was played. If we look at bishop g5, h takes, queen queen e8. Yeah, as I mentioned, this is just a small edge. So bishop d3, a nice controlled move. Queen c7 now. White castles. And it's here white plays, after king d8, white plays bishop g5 now. This is the moment chosen for bishop g5. Now here, if black takes on g5 in this particular position, queen takes, this is very pleasant for white. White's got a big advantage here. Look at that f file. So we have bishop e7 instead. Bishop takes, check, king takes, and now queen g4. So white is still a piece down here, just for one pawn. So it's a really fun position to check out, actually. Remember to check out the improved menu at Chess World, the puzzle books. There's a load created just from this game. It is puzzle-rich territory here with the king in the center. So black actually sacked a piece back. That's how desperate it seems to Tucano. If rook g8, as an example, you might think to protect the pawn, check, and here queen f4 check and bishop g6, for example, threatens queen f7. If rook f8 check, and yeah, this is forcing the piece back to be given back, and this is a load of pressure for black. In fact, white can celebrate the pin, not take immediately on f6, and now take on f6, and white's got a big advantage here. This is very, very nice. Look at the king still in the center. So it seems rook g8 doesn't really do black any favors. Here, by the way, on g5, white can casually just take on h6. Black's not going anywhere, really. Take this pawn even, cheekily. Just take a load of pawns, threaten mate. This is just showing how dangerous it is for black, this position, this piece sack. And white can get some material back anyway with a massive advantage. So very, very dangerous position. Black decides to give back the piece with knight takes e5. So we have queen takes g7 check, not even taking the piece back. So this was refused. Queen takes, knight f7, but now bishop g6 with the idea not just, well, queen takes f7 is immediately threatened. Here, in this position, if black tries rook f8, then f4 is really strong. For example, queen d6, f5, and black's getting in big trouble here. White's just getting the piece back anyway. Instead here, if we look at this position, it's very, very dangerous. If king d8, then that neglects f7. White can take on e6. And maybe even this is stronger than taking immediately on f7. The knight's pinned, it's not going anywhere. So white's getting the material back leisurely and with big interest. So it seems as though rook f8 is not as good as what is played, which is queen f4. Okay, now Leela just takes on f7, though, with the idea that if queen takes, then queen takes h8. Let's put that on the board. Queen f6 was played. If queen takes h8, and there's no problem for the queen there. It can always return back. It's not trapped. So we have queen f6. So that was Tucano's idea. The queen is taken off, and white has netted from all this one pawn. And you might think, is that totally winning here? Well, if we look at this side of the board, it's almost a 3-to-1 pawn majority. So let's see what Leela does now with this position after winning one pawn from all of that. Rook A, E1, we have black playing E5, knight E2, A5, F3. This signals that these pawns want to start moving. This pawn majority wants to get into action. Rook F2, Rook B8, H4. Yeah, the pawns are white's trump card here. Rook G8, G4. Knight B6, B3, ruling out any knight C4. Bishop D7, knight C1 with the idea temporary pawn sack, and white can try and control that file. Look at the bishop controlling E8. So white's prepared to sack a pawn here for knight D3 and to get the rooks to the 7th rank. Brilliant move. Justifying the whole rook F2 now. It makes total sense to infiltrate via that E file. So we have that now. This pawn is actually taken. White's going to be playing knight D4 anyway, and if E4 then that's check. So black took the pawn. The rook's double. So really controlling that file with the entry point in mind, E7. We have king G7 being played here. Knight D3. A takes. A takes. King H8. Rook E7. Yeah, it looks pretty painful here. Rook G7. White just takes that, and now check, and it's very, very difficult for black here. Black played king F8. If king H8, black's king is in big trouble after knight E5. You can see that knight takes a knight G6 check, for example. If rook D8, knight F7 check, picking up the rook. So what does black do here? It's problematic after king H8. If king G8, then again knight E5, rook D8. Here bishop G6 is very dangerous. For example, this continuation where black can end up getting mated. So the rook on the 7th is a very, very big deal. So this pawn sacrifice does seem to also pay great interest for white. So king F8 was played, rook H7. Is white going to be winning that H6 pawn? And there really will be a 3-0 pawn majority. King G8, rook takes H6. So 3 connected passed pawns on this side of the board, with the king as a bonus points to sort of attack as well. King G7 check. Rook F6. Now we have the king going to F2. Okay, black wants to trade a pair of bishops. The pawns keep going forward. Now rook D6. H6, the pawns keep going forward. King G3, the king steps up the board as well. F4, ready to support with G5. It's overwhelming, this position. These 3 passed pawns. This is total desperation, C5. If knight B6, well, knight E5 is one of many strong moves. Just push the pawns like this and end up checkmating black with either knight F7 or rook H7 as well as bonus points, even if the pawns don't queen. So we have C5 very desperate. So yeah, black hasn't got any real passed pawn potential now and is just waiting here. The game continues a little bit longer. So perhaps Tucano didn't think it was entirely winning just yet, because there is adjudication under T-set rules. So it looks entirely hopeless for black, though. So here the king comes in and then goes back. A bit of toying there. And now knight E5. D3. I've actually shot past the game. Pardon me. No, Tucano resigned before this. Go back to move 57, king E6, knight E4. The game actually ended here. Yeah, without further ado. Game actually ended here. Tucano thought it was completely busted here. So, as an example, king F5, check, king here, king H5. Yeah, this will be trivial to win. There's no stalemate there. And in fact, for example, like this, will lead to a quick checkmate. Okay, so I'll take you to where the game ended. So knight E4, the game ended here. So a game which is very, very interesting. That opening took me by surprise, and I've been wanting to go over this game ever since I saw it, really. Very excited by the piece sacrifice in the opening. I hope you are too, by the dynamic display of this game, especially in the opening stage. So a number of very interesting variations, which I turned all into, there's a puzzle book on Chessboard, Improve menu puzzle book. Check that out. So I hope you enjoyed this game video. If you did, click on the top left box, become a member of chessboard.net, check out the puzzle book for this game, and also just the annotated game in general from the Improve menu, learn from the masters. Okay, Comments, questions, donations, see the description. Like, share, subscribe with the notification bell. Really appreciated. Thanks very much.